My name is Castus Drave, designation 77 Kappa Tertius. I have killed 41 people across 9 star systems, and I remember every single one of their faces. Not because I choose to, because they burned the ability to forget out of me when I was 11 years old. I am what the Officio Assassinorum calls a polytemplar asset. That is a term you will not find in any official record. It does not exist on any data slate filed with the administratum, nor in any report submitted to the Ordo Sicarius. But it is what I am. They moved me between the temples, not because I failed, because I succeeded. Because my aptitude scores were too high across too many disciplines, and the directors primus could not agree on who should claim me. So they shared me. They passed me between their training halls like a weapon being tested by different hands, and each temple left its mark on my body, my mind, and what I will generously call my soul. I am going to tell you what it feels like inside each one, not the sanitized briefings that reach the ears of the High Lords when they cast their 2/3 vote to sanction a kill, not the heroic mythology that inquisitors of the Ordo Sicarius whisper to each other over a marsec in their private cabals. The real thing, the taste and the temperature and the sound of your own bones being remade. I want you to understand something before I begin. Every single temple of the Officio Assassinorum will ruin you. That is the point. You arrive as a human being. You leave as a weapon. The only difference between the temples is how they take you apart and what shape the pieces are in when they put you back together. I was taken from the Schola Progenium on Vauxhall Septimus when I was 9 standard years old. My parents were dead. That was the prerequisite. My father had been a mid-level administratum scribe. My mother had served in the Departamento Munitorum, pushing supply manifests across a grey metal desk for 14 hours a day until a lung infection killed her 6 months after my birth. My father followed her 3 years later, crushed beneath a collapsing archway during a structural failure in Hab Block 1940. The Schola took me in, fed me, educated me, tested me. It was the testing that changed everything. They gave us aptitude evaluations every 60 days, cognitive, physical, psychological. Most children scored high in one category, perhaps 2. The future commissars showed leadership and aggression. The future sisters showed faith and endurance. The future stormtroopers showed obedience and physical resilience. I scored high in everything, not the highest in any single category, but consistently in the upper third across all of them. The Schola's progenitor master, a thin woman named Alditha Corvain, told me I was being transferred. She did not tell me where. She gave me a small meal of protein paste and lukewarm recaf, watched me eat it, and then 2 men in unmarked black body gloves escorted me to a Valkyrie that had no identification markings on its hull. I was 9 years old. I did not cry. I had already learned that crying accomplished nothing in the Imperium of man. The journey took 17 days. I was sedated for most of it. When I woke, I was on Terra. I know this because they told me, and because the gravity felt different against the soles of my feet, heavier, like the planet itself was pressing down on me, saying, "This is where it all started, and this is where you will be remade." The first 3 years were general training, the School of Assassins. That is what they called it, though school is a word that implies desks and books and the gentle correction of errors. There were no gentle corrections. They were bone-wrenching exercise engines that pushed your joints to the point of dislocation and then held them there. There were chemical treatments that altered your muscle density, your reflex response times, your pain tolerance thresholds. There were the SynSkim trials, where they sprayed the black synthetic substance onto your body and you had to learn to breathe through it, to move in it, to fight in it while it bonded to your flesh like a second skin that was alive and hungry. Out of the 43 children who arrived with me, 9 survived to the age of 12. I was one of them. And that was when the temples came to look at us. They sent representatives from each of the 6 major clades. I did not know their names then. I know them now. The Vindicare, the Callidus, the Eversor, the Culexus, the Veninum, the Varnus. 6 philosophies of death. 6 different answers to the same question. How do you end a life that the Emperor needs ended? The Vindicare representative chose me first. They took me to a facility, that I was told existed somewhere beneath the surface of Terra, though the exact location was classified beyond anything my clearance would ever reach. The air there was different, thin, cold, recycled through machines so many times that it tasted like nothing at all, like breathing pure absence. The Vindicare temple believed in nothing. Absence of movement, absence of emotion, absence of everything except the target and the trigger. My instructor was a Lord Assassin who had been retired from active fieldwork after losing his left eye to an orc warboss on Armageddon. He never told me his name. He told me to call him Primus, and I later learned that every Vindicare instructor used that title. They had erased their identities as thoroughly as they erased their targets. He spoke in short, clipped sentences, never more than 6 words at a time. I would later understand that this was doctrine. Vindicare operatives were trained to limit their vocabulary to only words that were useful for their profession. Everything else was excess. Everything else was noise. Breathe in, he told me on the first day. Hold. Count to 12. Release. Again. I lay on my stomach on a stone floor for 9 hours that day, doing nothing but breathing. No rifle, no target. Just the floor and the air and the count. On the second day, he placed a single shell casing 200 meters away on a metal shelf no wider than my thumb. See it? He said. Do not look. See. I lay there for 6 more hours, training my eyes to focus at distance, until the shell casing became the only object in the universe. My eyes watered. My back screamed. The muscles in my neck turned to cables of fire. I did not move. On the 7th day, they gave me the Exitus rifle. It was not my Exitus rifle. That is an important distinction. Each true Vindicare assassin receives a matched set, rifle and pistol, handcrafted by a Magos artisan of the Adeptus Mechanicus and customized to their specific biological measurements. Grip width, trigger pull weight, ocular dominance. The weapon I held was a training model, but even so, it was the most beautiful object I had ever touched. The balance was extraordinary. It sat in my hands like it had been waiting for me. The telescopic sight was integrated so seamlessly into the receiver that the weapon felt like an extension of my own nervous system. And inside the rifle, they told me, dwelt a machine spirit, sleek, murderous, an echo of the assassin who would one day wield it. The rifle does not miss, Primus told me. You miss. The rifle waits for you to become worthy of it. I trained with that weapon for 114 days. I fired conventional rounds at targets ranging from 200 to 3,000 meters. I learned to read wind, to feel humidity changes against the exposed skin of my cheek, to account for planetary rotation over extreme distances. The spy mask they fitted over my face could scan heat signatures and energy sources across a wide spectrum and monitor enemy communications. But Primus insisted I learn to shoot without it first. The mask fails, he said once. It was the longest sentence he had ever spoken to me. Your eyes do not. In the Vindicare temple, you learn what patience truly means, not the patience of waiting for a shuttle or enduring a long sermon from an ecclesiarchy preacher. Real patience. The patience of lying motionless in a concealed position for days. There are verified accounts of Vindicare operatives maintaining a firing position for 6 standard years before taking their shot. 6 years, eating concentrated nutrient cartridges from their spy mask, drinking recycled water from micro-reservoirs in their sin-skin suits, urinating and defecating without moving their bodies more than a few centimeters, all for one moment, one trigger pull, one round that would end a rebellion, topple a heretic prophet, or put a neat hole through the skull of a planetary governor who had displeased the High Lords. The ammunition was extraordinary. I was shown the different types during my training, though I was never permitted to fire the rare specialist rounds. Shield breaker rounds, treated with psychically charged imprints and containing anti-phase circuitry that could overload personal force fields with massive bursts of energy. Turbo penetrator rounds, hypervelocity adamantine-jacketed shells surrounding a magno-sealed flux needle that could punch through ceramite plate and kill a Chaos Space Marine with a single shot. Hellfire rounds, whose cores were replaced with vials of mutagenic acid delivered through thousands of armor-piercing microneedles. Every round contained a miniaturized cogitator targeting spirit, guidance systems so advanced that the projectiles could track a target's heat signature and follow them if they tried to dodge. And when the round had done its work, it self-destructed, consumed itself as if devoured by a virus, left no trace behind, no forensic evidence, no ballistic fingerprint, just a corpse and a mystery. The feeling of the Vindicare temple was silence. Not the silence of an empty room, the silence of a mind that has been trained to compress the entire universe into a single point of focus. When I was deep in training, I could hear my own heartbeat as clearly as a drum. I could feel the pulse of blood through the capillaries in my right index finger as it rested on the trigger. The world outside that trigger, outside that scope, outside that one distant target, simply ceased to exist. It was peace. Terrible, empty, absolute peace. They kept me for 4 months. Then they gave me back. Why? I asked the logistics handler who came to collect me. Because, he said, not looking up from his data slate, they want you for something else. The Callidus Temple was different in every conceivable way. Where the Vindicare stripped you down to silence and distance, the Callidus built you up into someone else entirely. The temple was, at the time of my transfer, an all-female institution. That was not doctrine so much as biological practicality. The masters of the Callidus Temple had learned across centuries of experimentation that the female body and psyche metabolized polymorphine more effectively, and by and large, female novitiates made better chameleons than men. I was an exception. My cellular plasticity scores, measured during the general training phase, were in the 98th percentile regardless of sex. So, they brought me in. The first thing they did was implant the flex cartilage. I remember the surgery. They did not sedate me fully. They wanted me conscious so they could test my pain tolerance while the medicus adepts worked. It took 11 hours. They opened my face and placed synthetic cartilage beneath my cheekbones, my jaw, my brow ridge. They inserted hardened synth skin sheaths into my forearms and calves. They reinforced my skeletal structure with adaptive flex bone segments that could, under the right chemical stimulation, compress or expand by up to 12% of their resting length. When it was over, I looked in the mirror and saw my own face, unchanged. The implants were dormant, invisible, sleeping beneath my skin like insects waiting for spring. The polymorphine came next. There is no preparing someone for their first injection of polymorphine. They can describe the theory to you. They can show you diagrams and hololithic recordings. They can have you study the cellular restructuring process in a laboratorium until you can recite the biochemistry from memory. None of it matters, because when that drug hits your bloodstream, everything you thought you knew about your own body becomes a lie. The injection site was the base of my neck. I felt the cold spread of the drug moving downward through my spinal column, and then I felt my bones begin to shift. It was not pain, exactly. Pain is a signal, a warning. This was deeper. This was the fundamental architecture of my body declaring that it was no longer fixed. The flex cartilage implants activated, responding to the chemical stimulants in the polymorphine. My cheekbones began to migrate beneath my skin. I could feel them moving, grinding against muscle and sinew as they sought new positions. My jaw extended. My brow thickened. The synth skin sheaths in my arms contracted, reshaping the surface topology of my forearms until they were thinner, longer, paler than they had been moments before. "Hold it," my instructor commanded. She was a Lord Assassin, named only Tertia. Tall, thin, features that shifted subtly every time I blinked, as though she could not help adjusting her appearance even in conversation. "Do not let the drug control the shape. You control the shape." I tried. I concentrated on the image they had given me. A middle-aged man from some forgotten agri-world. Weathered skin, grey hair, heavy brow. I pushed my changing flesh toward that template, willing the polymorphine to obey. It did not. Not entirely. My left ear migrated too far. My nose collapsed inward for a moment before I caught it. One of my eyes went a shade of green that did not match the other. I was, for approximately 30 seconds, an abomination. A half-formed thing, with two faces competing for the same skull. Better than most first attempts, Tertia said. Most vomit. Some die, A single dose of polymorphine lasted 2 standard hours, but the effects could be mitigated at will by a trained operative. The key was empathy, not emotional empathy. You had to feel the person you were becoming, their height, their weight distribution, the way they held their shoulders, the cadence of their breathing. If you could internalize those details completely, the drug would follow your conviction. Over the following weeks, I learned to become other people. A dock worker from Necromunda, an ecclesiarchy priest, a female administratum clerk. That last transformation was the most difficult. The polymorphine could alter sex characteristics with enough concentration and the right implant configurations, but maintaining the disguise required absolute commitment. You were not pretending to be a woman. You were a woman. Your voice, your gait, your musculature, your bone structure, everything. Callidus assassins carried weapons that matched their philosophy of deception. The Catan phase sword, a blade forged from stolen Necron technology, capable of phasing through any material, any force field. It could pass through ceramite power armor like a hand through fog, reconstituting on the other side to deliver a wound that no conventional medicine could treat. The neural shredder, a short-ranged weapon of disputed origin that destroyed synaptic patterns in sentient beings, reducing a thinking mind to a screaming void. Poison blades, needle-thin, hidden about the body in places that even the most thorough search would not reveal. But the real weapon was the transformation itself. A Callidus operative could infiltrate an enemy civilization for months, years, living as a trusted aide, a spouse, a childhood friend, influencing decisions, planting seeds of doubt, and then, at the precise moment when the High Lords required it, sliding a phase sword through the target's throat while wearing the face of someone they loved. The feeling of the Callidus temple was displacement. You stopped knowing where you ended, and the disguise began. I would wake in the training barracks and catch my reflection in the polished metal wall and not recognize myself for 3, sometimes 4 heartbeats. I would speak and hear a voice that was not mine. I would reach for a cup and see fingers that were shaped wrong, too thin, too long, belonging to someone I had been imitating 3 hours earlier. Tertia told me that this was normal. The self is a construction, she said, applying polymorphine to her own arm with the casual ease of someone scratching an itch. Her features rippled. For a moment, she wore my face. Then she was herself again, or whoever herself was. We simply acknowledge what others refuse to see. That identity is a story, and stories can be rewritten. They kept me for 3 months. Then they gave me back again. And then they sent me to the Eversor temple. I need you to understand something. The transition from the Callidus temple to the Eversor temple is not a lateral move. It is not even a vertical one. It is a descent. The Callidus temple asked me to become someone else. The Eversor temple asked me to stop being anyone at all. The Eversor temple does not maintain a headquarters on Terra, not in the traditional sense. Its operatives are stored in cryostasis aboard secret starships and void stations scattered across the Imperium, kept on permanent high alert. But the training facility I was taken to existed in the Actic region of Terra, deep beneath the mantle of ice, a frozen catacomb of surgical theaters and conditioning chambers and cryocrypts that hummed with the sound of super-chilled methylon gas pumping through conduits. They walked me down a long catwalk suspended above a hexagonal hall. Below me, green-lit stasis tubes stretched in every direction, hundreds of them, each containing a curled, fetal shape, human, barely. Their augmetics twitched even in dormancy, fingers clenching, jaws working, as though they were killing things in their sleep. These are field operatives, my escort told me. He was one of the technologians who maintained the facility. He looked tired, haunted. Try not to make eye contact. They are unconscious, I said. I know, he replied. Try anyway. The Eversor training began with the drugs, Frenzen first, a psychostimulant that amplified aggression to levels that would kill an unaugmented human within minutes. I felt it hit my nervous system like a hammer striking an anvil. Every sound became an assault. Every shadow became a threat. My heart rate climbed to 190 beats per minute and stayed there. The room turned red, not metaphorically. My altered visual cortex literally shifted the color spectrum, filtering everything through a lens of rage, then fury. A metabolic accelerant that pushed my already enhanced physiology to its absolute limit. My muscles swelled. My tendons tightened like lute strings wound past their breaking point. I could feel individual fibers in my body tearing and reknitting in real time as the drug forced growth cycles that should have taken weeks into seconds. Then Spur, then Psychon, then Destroyer, then Terminus. 6 drugs, layered, cascading through my system in a sequence that had been perfected over 10,000 years of chemical experimentation. Each one building on the last, each one pushing me further from anything that could be called human. I tried to describe it afterward, in the debriefing. I could not. Language is a tool for communicating experience, and the Eversor combat drug regimen exists outside experience. There is no framework for it. You do not think, you do not plan, you do not fear. You become a single, unbroken impulse. Kill. Everything in your field of vision that is not dead is a problem. Everything that is dead is no longer relevant. You move to the next target with the inevitability of a planet orbiting a star. There is no choice. There is no hesitation. There is only the next kill. I lasted 47 seconds in my first live combat trial before the handlers subdued me with 3 simultaneous tranquilizer darts and a neural inhibitor field. In those 47 seconds, I killed 9 combat servitors and destroyed a reinforced bulkhead door with my bare hands. I could not remember any of it. They showed me the picked recording afterward. I watched myself on the screen, this thing that wore my body, moving with a speed and ferocity that my conscious mind could not process. It was leaping, tearing, screaming through a Vox-amplified death mask in a voice that was not mine. Its neuro-gauntlet was punching through plasteel armor plating, the long injector needles piercing through and delivering neurotoxin with each strike. In one hand, it held an executioner pistol, a weapon that combined a bolt pistol with a needle weapon, firing both explosive mass-reactive rounds and toxin-laced flechettes simultaneously. The thing on that screen was not me. The thing on that screen was what the Eversor Temple wanted me to be. A living bomb, a weapon with a heartbeat. And when that heartbeat stopped, when an Eversor was finally brought down, the cocktail of drugs in their system would react violently with the metabolic onset of death and trigger a bio-meltdown. The corpse would detonate with the force of a plasma bomb. I understood, watching that recording, why they kept the Eversors in cryostasis. It was not storage, it was containment. These were not soldiers. These were not even assassins in any meaningful sense of the word. They were detonation devices that happened to be alive. The drugs that made them so deadly were also ferociously addictive. Without constant infusion, an Eversor would die from withdrawal. But with constant infusion, they could never sleep, could never rest, could never stop wanting to kill. So they were frozen between missions. And when they woke, they had no idea if decades or centuries had passed. Time was meaningless, only the mission existed. You adapt well to the cocktail, the Eversor training master told me. He was an enormous man with scar tissue covering 60% of his visible skin. One of his eyes had been replaced with a targeting augmetic that glowed a steady amber. Your immune system is accepting the drugs faster than any recruit we have had in 37 standard years. Is that good? I asked. He looked at me. The amber eye word. That depends, he said, on whether you want to be human when this is over. They kept me for 6 weeks. When they pulled the drugs out of my system, it took 8 days of detoxification therapy before I could hold a cup without crushing it. 12 days before I could speak in complete sentences. 19 days before the urge faded to something manageable. They gave me back. The Culexus Temple was next. And this is where I need to be careful, because what the Culexus Temple did to me was not training. It was exposure. And what I was exposed to was something that the human mind was never meant to encounter. The Culexus Temple does not recruit through aptitude or skill. It recruits through genetics. Specifically, it recruits individuals who carry the pariah gene, an extraordinarily rare mutation that renders the carrier invisible to the warp. They have no psychic presence whatsoever, no soul if you believe the ecclesiarchy's definition. They are blanks, and being near one is an experience that stays with you like a scar. I did not carry the pariah gene. I was sent to the Culexus temple, not as a recruit, but as a test subject. They needed baseline data on how non-blank operatives responded to prolonged exposure to Culexus assets, and I was a convenient body with high resilience scores. The Culexus temple's headquarters was not on Terra. It was located on a dead moon, outside the range of the Astronomicon, in a fortified complex called the Fortress of the Soulless. To reach it required a warp transit of 43 standard days, followed by a sublight approach that took another 11. When we dropped out of the warp, I felt something change. A pressure that I had not known was there, a background hum that I had been living with my entire life, simply stopped. The Astronomicon, that great psychic beacon that the Emperor projects from the Golden Throne to guide humanity's ships through the warp, it was gone. We were beyond its reach. The silence was not peaceful. It was the silence of being truly, fundamentally, alone in the universe. The fortress itself sat beneath a permanent blanket of dread. I felt it before we landed. A heaviness in my chest, a wrongness that settled behind my eyes like a migraine made of grief. The servitor pilot who brought our shuttle down was sweating despite the cold. His hands trembled on the controls. Normal reaction, the Culexus handler told me. She was wearing a specialized psi-dampening hood that muffled whatever anti-psychic aura she carried. Even so, standing within 3 meters of her made my skin crawl and my stomach twist. You are feeling the cumulative effect of approximately 300 pariah gene carriers housed within a single facility. The sensation will not improve. It did not improve. They introduced me to an active Culexus assassin on my 3rd day. Operative designation, Null 77. No other name, no other identity. She was kept in a sealed chamber lined with psi-reactive materials that glowed a dull, angry orange in her presence. When the door opened, I understood why the Eldari called Culexus assassins the embodiments of pure evil. It was not evil. It was absence. Standing near Null 77 was like having a piece of your consciousness removed with surgical precision. My thoughts became fragmented, disjointed. I could not hold a complete idea in my mind for more than a few seconds before it dissolved, torn apart by the invisible anti-psychic field that radiated from her body like heat from a furnace. My vision blurred. My hearing became muffled. My proprioception, my sense of where my own body existed in space, began to fail. I stumbled. I could not feel my hands. And Null 77 just stood there, watching. Through the blank faceplate of her animus speculum, that terrible headpiece that amplified a Culexus assassin's natural anti-psychic abilities into a focused weapon capable of obliterating the mind and soul of an enemy psyker. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply was. Or rather, she was not. And that was not pulled at the fabric of reality like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of negation outward in every direction. I lasted 4 minutes before I collapsed. They told me later that 4 minutes was exceptional. Most non-blank humans lost consciousness within 90 seconds. Some suffered permanent psychological damage. The Culexus handler explained that in combat deployment, these effects were devastating against psychers, whose connection to the warp made them exponentially more vulnerable. A Culexus assassin, armed with psych-out grenades packed with the psychically negative dust produced as a byproduct of the Emperor's Golden Throne, could neutralize an entire coven of warp wielders, while the animus speculum focused the null field into a killing beam that did not merely destroy the body, but erased the soul. The feeling of the Culexus temple was emptiness, a void where something vital should have been. And the worst part was that after I left, after the shuttle carried me back within range of the Astronomicon, and that great psychic hum returned to the background of my consciousness, I realized that I had lived my entire life taking it for granted. The subtle warmth of the Emperor's light, reaching across the void, touching every human soul in the Imperium without their knowledge or consent. The Culexus temple had shown me what existence felt like without it, and I never wanted to feel that again. They gave me back. Again. The Venom Temple was quiet. That is the word I used in my debriefing report, and I stand by it. Quiet. Where the Eversor was a scream, and the Vindicare was a held breath, and the Callidus was a whispered lie. The Venom was quiet in the way that a sealed room filling with colorless gas is quiet. You do not notice it until you are already dead. The Venom assassins were selected from the finest alchemists the Imperium could produce. Their training began not with weapons or physical conditioning, but with chemistry. The understanding of biological systems at the molecular level, the interaction between toxins and living tissue, the precise calibration of dose to body mass to metabolic rate that could deliver death in 1,000 different ways, each one undetectable by conventional means. My Venom instructor was a thin, elderly man with steady hands and the gentlest voice I had ever heard. He introduced himself as Toxicarius Halm and served me a cup of tea during our first meeting. I drank it without thinking. 20 minutes later, my left arm went numb. Lesson 1, he said, watching me with calm, interested eyes. In this temple, everything is a weapon. The tea was laced with a paralytic compound derived from the venom glands of a Catachan face-eater. Your arm will recover in approximately 3 hours. I wanted you to understand the principle before we began the theory. The theory was extraordinary. The Venom Temple maintained an archive of over 700,000 toxic compounds, organic and synthetic, sourced from every corner of the Imperium and beyond. They had venoms from Xenos creatures that the wider Imperium did not know existed. They had synthetic toxins engineered at the molecular level to target specific genetic markers. They could create a poison that would kill only one person in a room of thousands, because it was designed to react with that individual's unique biochemistry. The weapons were elegant. Toxin injectors, small enough to be hidden in a ring or a pen, poison globes that could be thrown or placed and would release their contents as an invisible aerosol. Hook-fang blades, curved and wicked, coated in compounds that could cause death without leaving any metabolic trace in the victim's body. The Venom assassins prided themselves on their subtlety, where a Vindicare left a body with a hole in its skull and a Callidus left a body with a phase sword through its chest. A Venom left a body that appeared to have died of natural causes: heart failure, stroke, respiratory collapse. The medicus adepts would find nothing because there was nothing to find. The toxin had done its work and vanished, consumed by the same biological processes it had interrupted. We had the greatest level of success during the Horus Heresy, Halm told me. He said it without pride or regret, just fact. The last attempt on the War Master's life was made by one of ours, a master poisoner named Tobeld. He came closer than any other operative, closer than the Vindicare or the Eversor or the Callidus who went before him. He nearly succeeded. But he did not, I said. No, Halm agreed. He did not. The War Master was beyond our art in the end, but the attempt demonstrated the principle. No fortress is impregnable to us. No guard is vigilant enough. No food taster can detect what we can create. We do not force our way to the target. We arrive at the target. Through the water supply, through the ventilation system, through the skin of a handshake. The feeling of the Venom Temple was paranoia. After my training there, I could not drink water without analyzing its color, its viscosity, the way it caught the light. I could not eat food without cataloging its taste, searching for the faintest trace of something wrong. I woke up at night and checked my skin for injection marks. The Venom did not teach you to fear death. They taught you that death could be anywhere, in anything, wearing the disguise of the ordinary. They kept me for 7 weeks. Then they gave me back. The final temple was the Vanus, and the Vanus temple was the strangest of them all. The Vanus did not train assassins in the way the other temples did. They trained information operatives, analysts, data warfare specialists, individuals who could destroy a target not with a bullet or a blade or a poison, but with an algorithm, a data transfer, a carefully placed piece of information that would unravel a career, expose a secret, or trigger a chain of events that ended in the target's death without the Vanus operative ever coming within 1,000 kilometers of them. Their headquarters was a sealed data sanctum, a labyrinth of cogitator banks and hololithic projectors and encrypted data streams that pulsed with the collective intelligence of the Imperium's most dangerous information network. The Varnus maintained files on every important individual in the Imperium, every planetary governor, every inquisitor, every space marine chapter master, every rogue trader of significance. Their data crypts contained secrets that could topple worlds. The Vanus operatives rarely deployed in the field. They worked through telepresent means, operating from their sanctum or from an Officio Assassinorum-sponsored starship. They sent out swarms of tiny organic metal netfly automata, microscopic surveillance devices that could tap into opticables and pass through data feeds. Each individual netfly was unsophisticated, but en masse, their networked intelligence could assemble a complete picture of a target's communications, movements, alliances, and vulnerabilities. My Vanus instructor wore cogitator gauntlets that projected hololithic panes floating in the air around her. She manipulated data the way a sculptor shapes clay, pulling threads of information from a dozen sources simultaneously and weaving them into a coherent picture. She showed me how a Vanus operative could destroy a man without ever touching him. A leaked document here, a forged communication there, a financial record, subtly altered. A rumor planted in the right ear at the right moment. The target would find his allies turning against him, his funding disappearing, his authority questioned, his secrets exposed one by one until he was left standing alone, stripped of everything, and then the final stroke would come. Not a blade, not a bullet, a single piece of data that could cause his own people to destroy him. "We are the quietest temple," she told me, "and the most dangerous. Because the others kill the body. We kill the truth, and without truth, everything collapses." When a Vanus operative did enter the field, which was rare, they could unleash data phages and informational blackouts designed to subvert entire enemy communication networks. They could shut down a planet's defense grid with a single code injection. They could make a fleet go blind by corrupting its sensory data feeds. And they did it all from behind a screen, wearing cogitator gauntlets, surrounded by floating panes of light. The feeling of the Vanus Temple was knowledge, overwhelming, crushing, omniscient knowledge. The understanding that every person in the Imperium, from the lowest underhive Ganga to the mightiest Lord of Terra, existed within a web of data that could be read, manipulated, and weaponized. Privacy was an illusion. Secrecy was a temporary condition. The Vanus saw everything, and what they saw, they could use. That was the last temple. They gave me back one final time, and then a man I had never seen before, wearing the unmarked black of the Officio Assassinorum senior command, sat across from me in a bare metal room and asked me a question. "Which temple do you belong to, Drave?" I thought about it. I thought about the silence of the Vindicare, the displacement of the Callidus, the annihilation of the Eversor, the void of the Culexus, the paranoia of the Venenum, the omniscience of the Vanus. I had been inside all of them. I had felt what they offered. I had tasted each temple's particular flavor of ruin. "None of them," I said. "Correct," said the man. "You belong to all of them. That was 17 standard years ago. I have completed 41 sanctioned kills since then, 9 as a marksman, employing Vindicare methodology, 12 as an infiltrator, using Callidus techniques and polymorphine, 7 using Venenum protocols, leaving bodies that the Medicus adepts ruled as natural deaths, 6 through information warfare, Vanus-style operations where my targets were destroyed by their own allies after I fed the right data to the right people, 4 through directed violence, Eversor methodology, though I was never given the full drug regimen again. They told me that the 4 times was sufficient proof of concept. I suspect they were afraid of what a 5th dose would do to me. The Culexus missions were different. I did not become a blank. That is impossible. The Pariah gene is innate, not injectable. But I served as support for Culexus operatives on 3 occasions, providing conventional tactical capability in environments where their anti-psychic field had neutralized the primary target. I walked beside them. I fought within their aura, and each time I lost a little more of whatever it is that makes a person feel connected to the world around them. I am telling you this because someone should know. Because the Officio Assassinorum operates in a silence so complete that even the Inquisition only sees the shadows it casts. Because the High Lords vote to sanction a kill and sign a document and go back to their politicking without understanding what that signature creates, what it costs, what it does to the person who becomes the weapon. I have been all of them. The patient shooter in the ruins, the false face at the dinner table, the screaming thing in the drop pod, the shadow that walks beside the void, the poisoner, the data ghost. I have been all of them, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that none of them are human anymore. Not fully. Not in the way that matters. The temples take what they need from you and they burn away the rest, and what remains is efficient and lethal and utterly, irreversibly changed. Sometimes, in the hours between missions, I try to remember what Castus Drave was like before the Officio, before the temples, before the drugs and the surgeries and the training that rewired my nervous system and restructured my identity and taught me 63 different ways to end a human life. I remember a boy on Vaxhall Septimus. I remember protein paste and lukewarm recaf. I remember a woman named Alditha Corvain who told me I was being transferred and did not tell me where. I remember that boy did not cry. I think about him sometimes. That boy who had already learned that crying accomplished nothing in the Imperium of man. I think he was wrong. I think crying might have been the most human thing he ever did. And I think the temples took even that from him. They took the tears and the fear and the softness and the uncertainty, and they refined it all down to a single burning point of purpose. I am a weapon. I am 6 weapons. I am the Emperor's final sanction, deployed when the High Lords of Terra have exhausted every other option and require a problem to simply cease. I do not question my missions. I do not hesitate. I do not grieve. But sometimes, when the ship is quiet and the void outside the viewport is black and endless, I press my hand against the cold metal of the hull, and I try to feel something, anything, a pulse, a warmth, a connection to the galaxy that the Culexus Temple taught me could be severed at any moment. And sometimes, for just a moment, I almost remember what it was like to be human. Almost.